Hey everybody, David here again, and I've got another exciting video, or at least I hope it's exciting for you. This is about Power Platform and specifically all of the new changes with regards to error handling. And I'm going to show you the practical application of it. Now, there's a couple of videos out there on the internet, and as you guys know, I try to give a little perspective spin and how to tie the technology into business and why you would want to use it. So even though my example use case may be kind of funny or whatever the case may be, there is a real world business application for it. So before we get started, I want to head over here to github.com, and one of the nice things that at least I try to do for everybody here when I show you guys stuff on the Power Platform is to provide you a GitHub repository for some of the example files that I'm using in the video to try to help drive that home. And I don't charge anything for it, and I don't make you register for it. It's just part of what I do. So do me a favor, help me by liking, subscribing, and also to share the information with your colleagues if you work at a company. I'm just simply trying to grow the channel. I'm not even monetizing it to make any money, but I am just literally as a personal goal, just trying to, I like helping people and I like trying to educate folks on how to use different systems. Anyway, just trying to get the channel off the ground. All right, so with regards to what we're trying to talk about today is again error handling, and there's some specific nuances and use cases for it. Ultimately, at the end of the day, what you want to try to do is you want to increase the application's quality, and by dealing with the quality, what you're going to have is a much better user experience. And so what's better than to have some proactive error handling? And you may say, this is kind of a pain in the neck, and I would agree it can be because you've got to write all this additional code, but the effort could be worth it. But I've got something even better for you. Microsoft has now recently released the ability to deal with unhandled errors. So if we come over here to settings and we come down here to upcoming features, there is this item called formula level error management. Go ahead and look for that in your Power App settings. And I believe it is on for those of you that explicitly turn it on. Otherwise, the default setting is it's turned off. So go ahead and turn that on for new applications. You may want to, make sure you go through your old applications and make sure that, if you're doing any error handling in there, this setting or feature may or could break what you've done. So for new apps moving forward, not a big deal. For existing applications, just, know your app, know what it's, programmed and what's being done, and just experiment with a copy in a lab environment just to make sure that anything that you've done doesn't need to be updated, changed, or reconfigured. So with that being said, and the prerequisite setting being turned on, as you guys may know, there is this application level or application layer, and there's two properties that we want to deal with. And so the first one is always on start, right? And so what I'm doing here in on start in this application is I have a variable that I'm setting vApp name, and this is what I'm publishing down here on the label. But there's another reason to the madness for providing this information, and that's because what we're going to do in this other object, which is what else we're going to get, is called on error. Now, I'm doing a bunch of different things. I believe in making code as readable as possible, although it is an art that I'm never seem to master. I get better as time goes on, but nonetheless, what I try to do, and this is kind of the problem with Power Apps in general, when you're coming from traditional code, you can have separation of concerns, but dealing with a lot of code in a tiny little window and a little bit of space, you really got to learn good housekeeping skills. So one of the things that I do is I make sure to comment everything. I put line dividers in here. There's a reason for it when you get into Monitor. And for those of you that are not familiar or have not used Monitor, we're going to touch base a little bit on that in this video. But when you make good coding practices here, as you move into or forward into Monitor, it's going to really, really help you all out. I'm going to get on a soapbox real quick and just talk about things that I've talked about in other videos. I've got a mix of really bad practices here and some good practices. So this one's called BTN, my good button name underscore one. And then the rest of it's just icon one, image one. It's the lazy approach. You just throw stuff on the screen. Well, this is where this generically, just leaving stuff the way that it comes when you insert it off of the insert menu and not changing it to good name. So for example, I don't even know what this is, icon. So that's a logo. So you could do something like ICO logo. Just, prefix it with what it is, like an icon, and then specifically state its intended use and or purpose. So if you follow that as a minimum best practice, you'll know that a BTN is a button, an ICO is an icon, IMG is an image. We're not really sure what that one, actually that is the logo. So what was this item? Oh, okay, this was the forward button. So we could do ICO forward. Anyway, I'm not going to do all that now. But the point is, use good naming conventions. And the reason for that, well, actually, I'm going to hold off on that because it's going to become evidently clear once you see what's going on here. So let's go back to the application on error, and let's go talk about the three main areas that I've got in here. So the first one that I'm doing is I'm grabbing a variable. I guess I got to change gears yet again to let you know I've got two SharePoint documents, or two SharePoint lists rather. And these SharePoint lists, the first one is called error kind. So with this feature, you have what they have, or rather what they call error kind. And so there's numerical index values. And by default, you're only going to see the number that the error handling is reporting. So what I've done is a key value pair with title as well as value. And I found this on a blog post. I think his name's Matt Delaney, and he had that out there. It was really, really helpful. It was also in Microsoft documentation as well. But nonetheless, credit out to Matt and his blog. Thank you very much. And so what I've done is, taken that and used it here as a essentially a lookup table so that I can get some plain English understanding of what that value code means. Because, what is a reference to something if you don't actually have the ability to resolve it? The other list that we have here is called error log. And so in the error log, we're getting a couple of things. We're getting the title. Now, this is where I'm putting the application, not only the name, but I'm using a / and then the environment name. So application and environment. And so this is the concept here is a main global repository. Now, don't suggest that you use this with prod, dev, and QA. Simply just use this on your production environments. And so for the production apps, this makes absolute sense. And the reason for that is that, when you're writing all of this log information into the SharePoint list, you can see the error message, like this one, you couldn't divide by 0. You can see that it was on the home screen. You can see the source. This actually tells you the object name that caused the error. So you can go right into monitor and understand what's going on with it. You can see, and this is, again, remember I said good naming conventions for the objects that you stick on screen. So if I just had, button 1, button 2, button 3, this one I got BTN, which is a button. It's my good button name, and its property, which is on select. So I know that there's some code that caused an error in the on select property for this particular button. I know what screen it's on. And there's this other item in here. I think it's called, maybe I'm not showing it, observed. So this is a referenceable object that may be, so for example, in this button, I'm creating a variable, and then I'm using that variable in this text control box. And so this is where the error was also observed. So it shows you the kind of the breadcrumb trail about where things are. The details, I've got both the HTTP response as well as the code that's there. There isn't anything in the error, so it's just writing out HTTP code for right now. And SharePoint, this is a nice thing about using the SharePoint list. So if you're going to use SQL Server or you're going to use some other thing, you may want to go ahead and use a created and then use the default value of today. But SharePoint handles this automatically for you. And because this is all nice and tightly integrated in with PowerApps, it takes the user dot, whatever, and fills out who it is. So what we have here now is a central log for all applications that we know what the error is, when the user got the error, as well as who experienced the error. And so again, this is not just one app, this is across every single app that you may have in your production environment. And I think you might see where we're going with this. So I created this kind of ugly, I'm not the best at creating, Power BI visuals, but, it's not too slouchy. This is a dashboard that I thought that might be helpful. So, the whole thing about this is if a user experiences an error and they can click on it to get rid of it and continue along doing their job, their work, chances are they're never going to report that to you. And so this is a problem. And the reason it's a problem is because it erodes user confidence in your applications. And so all it takes is some very well-connected individual in your organization, or somebody that's highly respected, or even just somebody that just has a position of seniority or authority, maybe the CEOs, the VP, EVPs. And if one of those users experience something negative and makes a negative comment about, yeah, this app is unreliable, and they know enough that it's in the Power Platform, and then they make the assumption that the entire platform is no good, all it takes is just one misunderstanding of what's going on, or oversight by IT or the developers. And the last thing you want is somebody saying, you know, these power applications are just really unreliable. They're not that good. And then all of a sudden, all of the value that this platform can bring to your organization is quickly eroded. So now that this feature's here, I almost personally feel like if you don't implement something like this, you're doing a disservice to yourself and your company. And so at the end of the day, if something bad were to happen, then, if you make the choice to just simply not do anything about it, that's a very lackadaisical approach, and you kind of get what's coming with regard to the feedback if the users, suffer a really bad experience. So in any event, enough of the soapbox about why you should do it. That is in the can here. It's up on the repo for you to download. There is some configurations. If you need help with anything, leave comments in the comment box below. I can maybe do supplemental videos and or just do some screenshots to help you guys out with some of the configuration. But I put it up here so at least you guys can get to it. All right, so now that you know the two tables that's involved, you see the end game, or the where we're going with the output. We know why we're doing it. We see the report that's there. Let's look to the code a little bit more to see what's going on. So in this section right here, because this is to the first line, this is where I'm creating a customized notification experience. I'm using some HTML. So for those of you that don't know, you can use HTML styling and formatting in your notifications. And there is a 500 character limit, in case you didn't know that as well. The other thing that I'm doing here is just providing some details. So I'm using the first error.message. So the first error is essentially going to grab the first error within the errors table. And so all of that information is available to you. There's also, I think it's all errors is actually the table that you can go through and parse if you want to go ahead and use that. But we're just using the first error because we're capturing events in real time as they occur. So that's all this is doing, is providing a notification type of error. And it's taking every unhandled error, but I'm not telling the end user it's unhandled. I'm just simply saying, hey, this is an unexpected error. Because if you say unhandled, that it may lead to some more negative feedback, because, oh, if it's unhandled, then maybe you were just lazy and didn't handle it. And so that could be true. But on the flip side, chances are they're just unexpected. You didn't really expect them to be there. And so this is kind of the catch-all error handling, and it's logging it in all real time. And you saw the output in that in the PowerPoint. So the other thing here that we're doing is we're patching it to the SharePoint list. So this is just simply a patch going to the SharePoint, going to the error log table, and we're simply putting all of this information out. And we're able to grab the active screen name. This is how we're getting that. We're using first error.source, first error.observe, first error.details, the HTTP response, and we're concatenating that with the HTTP status code. So all of that gets logged as well. The vkind, this is the lookup that we did at the top, because the number that's going to be provided here is worthless. And so what we want to try to do is get that plain text value of what that is. So if you don't do this little step or extra step, then what you're going to get is just number 25, number 16, 4, 6, whatever that number is. So doing that lookup puts that in there so you can get some plain English. The other thing that's in there is the first error.message, and then of course the title. This is the V app name. This is what we populated in the application on start. Now, there is ways that you can use environment variables to keep track of this, maybe some flows, but honestly, at the end of the day, when you put this into production, it is a manual step. And so unfortunately, it is just kind of a little manual configuration. This is going to potentially create a challenge for you in a DevOps scenario. However, it's very, very easy to just go in and just literally put a text value in the application on start to change it to the application name as environment. But there are programmatic ways that you could do it. It's just a lot of extra work for very little value return. In a DevOps scenario, it very well may be worth it. And I am very big into application lifecycle management type use case scenarios. But in this use case, honestly, just one value, it just didn't feel worth it to me personally. You guys may agree or disagree, and that is absolutely fine. So the other thing that I wanted to show you with regards to the error handling is over here at the very bottom. Let's see here, we've gone through this area. This is where we're writing to the central log. And then finally, Azure Trace. So what Azure Trace will, or not Azure Trace, what the trace function will do for you is when you're using Power Apps Monitor, and I showed you this monitor thing over here on the side for advanced tools, it will show up actually with the trace information, the same information essentially that we're logging out to SharePoint. Now you don't have to do both of these, but I left this in here as an example for you so that you can implement either one or the other. And if you can't want to, you can certainly integrate both of them. And so the other thing that it'll do is it'll pop this information over to Application Insights. And for those of you that aren't familiar, go look at how to implement Application Insights specifically using with Azure Monitor. And then once you've done that successfully, because this video is not about that and I don't want to digress too far into that, if we come over here to the app applications area, over here in the properties flyout, you'll have this one thing called an instrumentation key. And this instrumentation key is what comes from the Azure Application Insights. And that Application Insights is a sub feature or subsection under the much higher parent service called Azure Monitor. So you'll go into Azure Monitor, you'll implement Application Insights, and as soon as you do an instance of that, it'll give you an instrumentation key. Pop that value in here. Now you won't get logging and telemetry to Application Insights until you save and publish the app after you've provided the instrumentation key. But in any event, with that being done and with this extra code here that's providing a trace with the trace function, you will get that information into Application Insights and you can proactively filter and monitor reporting based on that information there as well. So some of the other interesting things that's out there is the kind. And the other reasons that I did kind, you can see here I've got divide by 0, invalid argument type. And so these provide high-level categorical classifications of what the errors are. And so if we go back over into here, now I didn't do it here, but another good little dash lit to put on your dashboard could be, the volume of kind of errors that you're experiencing across the entire application fleet as a whole. And as you know, each application programming platform has quirks and nuances, and you may be more susceptible to certain kinds of errors in your organization than others. And so as a result of that, this is a good way of getting in front of it and seeing the insights, and then you'll have special training sessions, maybe a lunch and learn with your developers, and saying, hey guys, we're experiencing these issues on this particular technology platform. Here's how you get around it. Here's how you avoid it. And again, this is all about being proactive and making sure to get ahead of it. So now what I want to do is kind of show you the user experience. So I'm going to show you this screen here. And I also have another screen that is absolutely identical. The only way you know it's a different screen is because the button back and forward is on a different side of the screen. But it makes a difference in the error log. So one of the things that we're going to do here, if we look over here at the created date, here's yesterday, everything's yesterday. So anything we create will be fresh and new for today. So if we come back over here, and what this field is, we're taking 1 and we're dividing it by the number that is in here. So if I do 4, it should get like 0.25, because 1 divided by 4, it should be, a decimal of like 4 quarters, and we get 0.25. And so all of this is well and good, but what if we did 40, right? And so we get a much smaller number, another decimal moves out. But instead of 0, what if we substituted 0 with a capital O as an ostrich? And so if we do that, we're going to get a problem. Now, you may be saying, hey, I thought you said you had some HTML in there. And I do have some HTML in here. And so the reason that we're seeing this in this particular way is because I am doing something very specific in the code. And I want to show you this as well. So the next thing that we can do is this is the handled event for this button. And what I'm doing is I'm taking the one and dividing it by the input and putting that later down into a variable that I'm referencing in the label that is below it. See, it's vnum in that label. And so the calculation that's going on here, all of this is being wrapped around this if error. So go ahead and hop out to the Microsoft documentation. Make sure that you look at, all of the nuances and all the really cool and creative ways. I showed you one example here, and you can use it in any number of ways. And so at this point, I'm wrapping this around this particular text. Now this is being proactive. And so because of that, it is a handled event. It's not being caught by this generic catch-all, which is buried up underneath the application on error. This is kind of just like the fallback to catch any unhandled known errors. And so if we look at this text here on this button, we see that I'm simply just taking the information and I'm putting it inside of a variable, and I'm not doing anything with it with regards to handling that event. I don't care. It's just whatever's going to happen is going to happen. So if I do this now over here and I click it on unhandled submit, watch what happens. I get this big, bold, highly formatted notification where I have, hey, unexpected error, right? This is definitely in the user's face. And so there's a little bit of formatting, and now I've got some, some nice information here, because if we look at the handled submit, there's no formatting, it's just out there. So it's a continuous string. Maybe it's a little bit hard to read, but this is a little bit definitely more clear and in your face, hey, there's a problem. And not only that, it's formatted, but everything is on its own line. And so all I did is just use a couple of line breaks. And so you can go look and see how all of that was done and handled there. All right, guys, so I think you've seen how we can take handled and unhandled errors, and we've generated a few. Let's go over to the second screen, and let's programmatically look and see what our screen names are here. So the home screen is called home, and the secondary screen is called other screen. So I've clicked the forward button, and now I've only had the back button. So this is the some other screen, and we'll just click it with a null value, okay? I'm handling it. I get an operation by 0. This will be the same type of error, but because I didn't wrap it around the if error, I'm getting this down as an unhandled error. So the same error, but two different ways. One I handled proactively, and the other one I just said, hey, I don't care. And so the premise here is that for the applications that you build going forward, and even some of the legacy applications that you have, if you haven't done any error handling, look at how much value you can get by simply hopping over into an application, going into the application area, and minimally just adding these first two areas, which will log it out to SharePoint. And you don't have to do any extraneous, all through the app, looking and writing and wrapping everything around if errors, because that can get arduous and very, very tedious, especially for large applications. So something is better than nothing. And because it produces all of the errors in this log, it may get very verbose, it may get very noisy, you may get common errors that maybe aren't quite a big issue. One of the big things, and credit out to Shane Young over at PowerApps 911, he made a great point in his video, because he did another video too similar to what I'm doing. He took maybe a different slight spin on it, but in any event, in his video, he made a great point where if you're using the user's Office 365 and you start typing in maybe a person's name, and you do it incorrectly, it's going to generate an error. And so that is going to get very noisy and very verbose. And I encourage you to jump over into his video series, because he can add on what I'm showing here. And in addition to that, he can also show you an example of essentially how to filter out. You guys should hopefully know how to filter stuff by now, because if you're watching this more advanced video, then you probably want to go check out some of his videos there as well on how to do the filter. But in any event, you can filter this out by doing if something is in the error message, then just don't go ahead and log it. Just leave it alone. That way you're not recording all of that noise into your SharePoint list. All right, so in any event, this is it for this video. I hope you found it helpful and instructful. Just to kind of walk through everything real quick, this is the Power BI report. This is the table that will generate the log table. This is an example app. Okay, so you can either do one of two things. The zip file will allow you to go into the make.com experience and then you go into applications, and then there's an import option when you get into applications. See, import Canvas app. This is where you're going to go ahead and use this where you're going to go ahead and use this example zip file. The example MS app, you have to be in Studio. And the way you work this is, just go ahead and go to applications. You'll hit new app, you hit Canvas. Just type any old thing in here because it doesn't matter. You're not going to save it out. And then once you get the Studio, the place where you can actually design and make a Canvas app, then what you're going to do is jump over into, so this might take a while. What you want to do is jump over into this file area and come over to open, and you'll just choose browse. And from the browse menu, you'll choose the example.ms app file. Now that will load, and then you can save it from here if you so choose. But in any event, what that'll do is it gets you this application as you see here. So a couple different ways of loading that app. I want to let you know that that's up there. This is the kind, that's the lookup matrix table that I showed you about. The README file, don't worry about that. That's just this thing out here. And then, of course, I have the report wallpaper JPEG. This is the wallpaper that's inside of this report in case you wanted to use that or do something with that. So all of the files that I showed here in this video are up here. Anyway, that's enough for this video. I am done. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.